So thank you all for joining the call today. I'm so excited for the panelists that we have, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But we have an amazing 1 hour for you today. So first, I have Eneida Roman, who's the co-founder and board chair of the Latina Circle, and we know them as Amplify LatinX out of Boston. So Eneida, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thank you, David. Delighted to be here this morning. So again, like David said, Eneida Roman, originally from Puerto Rico, but I've lived in Boston for a little over 20 years. I'm an attorney by trade, and my work, my leadership work as an attorney is what led me to the creation of Amplify LatinX. We started as Latina Circle 10 years ago, and 5 years ago, we expanded to become Amplify, not only to include executive leadership, but also political leadership and leadership across sectors, and of course, economic mobility for small business owners. And I'll share more later, but that's a big picture summary of what we do. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Next, we have Laurie Supinski, who's the director at Start Garden in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Hi, thank you, David, for inviting me here. Happy to share some of the story of Start Garden. So we are located in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and as an organization, we're actually celebrating our 10th year. So very excited about that. I've been with Start Garden for about 6 years. And we're an organization that seeks to obviously help entrepreneurs. We have co-working space. We do some early stage capital programming. But then a lot of our work is around thickening the networks of entrepreneurs with a focus on entrepreneurs of color. And as a community, about the time I joined the organization, Grand Rapids had the unfortunate notoriety of being cited as one of the worst places for African Americans to open a business. And so we took that to heart, and we decided we needed to dig in and change that perception. So that drives a lot of the work that we do now.
Thank you. And last, we have Raquel Robinson, who is the Director of Programming at the Lightship Foundation based out of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, David, for having me today. Like David said, I am the Director of Programming for Lightship Foundation, headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio. Lightship is an impact-driven organization that helps serve remarkable entrepreneurs. And when we say remarkable, we're saying underrepresented, underserved. But in terms of storytelling, we just want to change that narrative and the negative language around underrepresented, because we definitely don't underestimate our founders. And so we think that we're remarkable. We help them grow, scale, and eventually exit their businesses through programming, resources, mentors, and just great workshops and things like this. And so happy to be here and learn more about all you all and your work that you're doing.
All right. So Raquel, I'll stay with you and ask this question, but I'll ask all the panelists the same question. This is not a new topic. We talk about it on a daily basis in our communities and forums like this. But we felt that we needed to have this conversation again and keep this at the forefront. Can you tell us, what do you see as bright spots, places where we still have blind spots, where we don't know what we're doing wrong? But based on what you see in your community, how are we doing?
I think that in Cincinnati, we're working. You always have more work to do, but I think we're getting there, and we're understanding that it really isn't a lack of resources, more so a lack of resourcefulness. And so trying to connect with our corporate partners, our decision makers, our policy makers, I think that's where we're starting in Cincinnati. We understand that we can't do it alone. It has to be a community effort. And I think that we're just now, as an ecosystem, like in terms of Startup Cincy, we're just now learning how to work together. Like you said, you were at Black Tech Week in July, and that was an amazing experience. You saw people from all over the city coming out, but it really was like a reset in terms of like the tempo of the ecosystem and just seeing all kind of people together. And so I think working together, creating environments like this are super important. But I think that people really appreciated it, because coming out of COVID, I think everybody got super spoiled in terms of like, we don't get a lot of face time with everybody. And so I think us coming together and doing things like that it's definitely making a difference, but it's a start. You know, we definitely have some ways to go. So
I love Black Tech Week, and when I was there, I loved how you could network outside the events, and that's where a lot of the stories were being told, and about people from different parts of the city, even people flying in from different parts of the country, for that conversation, and making and normalizing Blacks in tech, right, and kind of elevating and saying, yes, you have Black founders as well doing incredible work, like you said, remarkable work in that space. Laurie, tell us about Grand Rapids. And you said, you traditionally, or when you first started this, that there was a lot of challenges. How are you doing today? And, what are some bright spots that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're doing better, but I still think we have a long way to go. And that's not a bad thing, because we are seeing, we're changing the needle. So I think that's good. But as an organization, Start Garden started out really kind of focusing on tech and high tech, high growth. And 10 years ago, that meant that most of the people coming through Start Garden and the programs were white males. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a whole lot of other entrepreneurs in the community and in the tech community that are not white males. And so it was really just trying to change people's mindset, and then create an environment that was open and welcoming, and letting people know that, our organization is really created to serve all kinds of entrepreneurs, tech and entrepreneurs of color in tech, but also other kinds of businesses. I think economic development organizations a lot of time, think tech is the only high growth industry that there is, and that's not true. There's a lot of different, product industry, service industry, and they can all be wealth creating opportunities, not just for the individual entrepreneur, but for the community and job creation and everything else. So I think we kind of opened our minds, and so I think we're helping to open the minds of the community.
Eneida, let me bring you into this conversation. Tell us about how Amplify LatinX has been able to change the narrative, both in Boston, but also highlight this across the country. And, as a co-founder, what was your vision for starting this?
Yes, thank you, David. So let me start by saying that the work is never done, right? I think Laurie and Raquel, they both said that. Study after study, both local, national, demonstrate the remarkable potential and simultaneous barriers, right? So I think the pandemic really shed light on these inequities, and we all knew they were there, but I think the pandemic gave pause to a lot of leaders, and in understanding the importance of inclusive representation, the importance of inclusive entrepreneurship, the importance of economic mobility, right? And so part of what really motivated us was this precisely negative narrative that there is regarding Latinos. There are Latinos in positions of power and impact and influence, but these stories are not being told. So we try to harness the power of storytelling by amplifying positive stories, and by advocating for policies that that affect real change. Because we can talk and talk and talk, but unless there are policies in place that really affect those those systemic barriers that have existed for generations, we're never going to be able to make a true impact. And so, in doing so, we partner with public, private, nonprofit sector leaders, and the media, everybody, right? Because it's important that that we all come together, and that we focus on shaping economic mobility initiatives with these allies who understand and are willing to champion this equitable representation that that we need.
Yeah, I'd love to come back and dig a little bit more into the policy piece with you. Raquel, can you tell us a little bit about the Lightship Foundation and how you are helping drive better access to capital and just changing the narrative for Black and Brown founders?
Yes, this is my favorite. All the programs that we do, I get excited about it. So we offer like a suite of programs for our founders. And so one of them that we offer is an accelerator. And so with that accelerator, we don't take the traditional approach like, you're in a classroom, you have to learn this curriculum. Instead, we do 2 6-week sprints. And so one of those sprints, we attempt to partner you with a corporate partner that we have in our network. So for example, we've recently invested in a mobile dentistry unit. And so what they do is they go across communities, underserved communities, into dental deserts, which are 600 million communities across the US. And so we were able to partner them up with P&G, who own Crest, Oral-B, and then also a partnership with Ford, who were able to donate vans and get those branded in those Crest and Oral-B branding. And so it's just really exciting to see them kind of be able to have these activations across the country. And so another sprint that we would do is like a branding sprint, a hiring sprint, but we really try to understand what does that business need in those 12 weeks that we spend with you. And the program is different for every founder that we touch. And with that program, we offer funding as well, $250,000 up to $500,000 investment from Lightship Capital. Another program that is my favorite, which I really think this is where community is built and this is where founders are networked and learning from each other face to face, is our Lightship Bootcamp. It's a 2-day program. And so we really are just hanging out for a couple of days. We're going through artificial intelligence, customer discovery, legal, fundraising, and then while you're on the ground, you get to pitch to our entire investment team. And so we want founders to feel confident about talking to any investor and being confident about asking for millions of dollars to fundraise. Because I think when we're talking about underrepresented and underserved, I think a lot of us, we haven't seen that, and giving them an opportunity to just feel comfortable going into these rooms and helping them understand that you belong here and this was meant for you. And so getting them ready for that. And then another program that we offer virtually is called Twitch Pitch. Twitch Pitch was born out of COVID. And so we realized we weren't able to talk to founders face to face in boot camp. We were kind of trying to figure out, virtual programming. And so one program that came out of that was a live pitch competition on Twitch. And we have found plenty of founders that have gone through our accelerator from that program and also have gotten funding from the capital side. And we're the first company to ever have a live pitch competition on Twitch. So it's super exciting. But if you guys have time, like it's online on our YouTube, you can check it out anytime. But the winner of that gets $25,000 at the end of it, plus just different networking opportunities. And then, of course, last but not least, we have Black Tech Week. That is the newest program that we offer. It is in Cincinnati. If you're familiar with the music festival that Cincinnati hosts, it's going to be the week of the music festival next year. And so it's just a suite of workshops, keynotes. This year, our keynote was Serena Williams, and she came in and talked about her venture firm and talked about, everything that she's doing to help these founders. And then she announced her retirement like a couple of weeks after, which was crazy because we had just saw her and she was talking about, how tennis and everything that she's learned, how she uses that to make decisions and with her venture firm. So always really exciting things going on at Lightship. So.
Yeah, that Serena Williams keynote generated so much buzz, and it's really about showing that by having people like Serena be in venture capital, showing that it is okay and it is possible and it's normal for people like her to be in those positions of power and influence. So that was really exciting to be a part of. Laurie, I'm going to turn it over to you. And there's something remarkable that you all do that I've heard other directors talk about it in other conferences, et cetera, but this idea of kind of creating equitable leadership. Can you tell us and just introduce that concept first so people know what you're talking about, but then also tell us real life stories of where are the friction points, and even if you have 2 people that look the same and talk the same from the same household, there's friction. When you have 4 people that look very different and talk and have all these different viewpoints they come from, how do you address those friction points and how do you create this equitable leadership and practically make it work?
Yeah. So it is interesting. There's 4 directors at Start Garden, and we all have equal leadership. It's the 4 of us that make the decisions. And so I am the only female. We have Daryl Ross, who is African-American. We have Jorge Gonzalez, who is Latino. And we have Paul Moore, who is a white male. And he's been with Stark Garden since the beginning. So he's really seen the organization morph, so to speak. And we all come from different backgrounds in the community with different ties, but all of it with economic development. And so we really felt like, as an organization, if we were going to be authentic in trying to create this inclusive community that for entrepreneurs, that we had to embrace that on our team, and we had to embrace that with the leadership. And so, you know, as we talk about the strategy for the organization, as we create programs, as we, you know, work with entrepreneurs, it's really interesting that the four of us definitely bring four different perspectives. And, you know, there has to be a lot of trust, and there has to be a lot of respect, because we have to be honest and open with each other, and we have to explain how we feel and why we, you know, why we're coming at something in a certain way. And we have to agree that we're going to work through it until we come to one decision that we all agree on. And, you know, sometimes it's ugly. We were just talking last night. We were like, it could be really messy, and sometimes your feelings get hurt. But it's not about our feelings and our ego. It's about these, you know, these are real life. You know, we're talking about entrepreneurs, we're talking about access to networks and access to capital, and how do we want to change things in our community. And we all have to, you know, own up to the fact that we don't all approach it the same way or the right way, and that maybe collectively we can come up with something that is better, and that's how we approach it.
Can you give us an example of a situation where you know, there was so much friction that you're like, okay, we just got to walk away? Or you know, how do you resolve, you know, because this is like a real life scenario, right? Like when you have people of different viewpoints, it's great, diversity is great, but there's also a need to kind of come to a consensus. You can move things forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to, you know, come up with specific stories without, you know, I mean, without talking about maybe specific entrepreneurs. I mean, sometimes it's, I mean, even last night, so we had a big demo day last night, which is, hopefully I'll get to talk about that program. It's called the Stark Garden 100. And so we have 100 entrepreneurs, and we narrow it down to 10 people last evening who were each going to receive a $20,000 grant. So 10 people each getting 20,000. And the entrepreneurs in the room were, you know, it was a beautifully diverse group of people. And so our judges had to, you know, give us their recommendations. And then clearly we have our own recommendations as, you know, people that have worked with these entrepreneurs. And so, you know, we're trying to look at this group of 10 and figure out, you know, how do we narrow this down? And so it was a little messy, and we were, you know, and we try to, I mean, we're picking them based on their idea and their executive summary and, you know, all of these criteria for entrepreneurship. But at the end of the day, we also want to make sure that our pool of entrepreneurs that we select represent a diverse community. So you know, it's.
Absolutely. And the reason I asked the question is because as we talk about diversity, we need to learn to live in this diverse universe together, right? Like, it's not just about saying we want diversity, but when there's conflict, we shy away, or we say, well, there's too much conflict, so we're not going to address it. But being able to learn and adapt and say, when you bring diversity into the room, you're going to have diverse voices and diverse opinions, and being able to kind of create a framework to say, ultimately, we want the best for our entrepreneurs. And therefore, you know, we're going to find out a common way to do this. And it looks like you all have that kind of framework that allows the best people to move forward. And you have a way to, you know, have that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
That's beautiful. So, Eneida, let's kind of dig a little bit more into, you know, why you started Amplify LatinX, and also some examples of how you've been able to move policy forward, put Latino community into that the decision making and into the spheres of influence?
Yes, of course. I'll start by saying that our focus is really three-pronged because one of our most active programs is the Power Up program, which is focused on Latino entrepreneurs. And that leads to leadership, right? Because it's not only you seeing yourself as a leader in the community, but also you can become a civic leader. And then obviously it also ties into that policy and advocacy component. And I'll revisit that when I go over, a little bit more how we approach this, right? So our focus has been to activate this untapped economic potential, right? There's a huge segment of Latino community that is entrepreneurial, and we're starting businesses, at a much larger uh, space than the typical, white households. And so the challenge is that it's not that we're not entrepreneurial, it's not that we're not starting businesses, it's that our businesses don't have those resources and don't have that access to capital and don't have those opportunities to grow and to create wealth, right? Because we know that through entrepreneurship and of course home purchases and investments is how families achieve this wealth. And we know that the color of wealth is in our faces, and that people of color have much less wealth, accumulated wealth, than non people of color, like than white households. So we do, our programs are very different and varied, but like I said earlier, we focus on telling the stories, on amplifying the impact, on connecting them to the resources, on the creation of a digital directory, so that people who are looking for procurement opportunities can find these businesses. The businesses that are not procurement ready, we train them, we give them technical assistance so that they can become ready. And then we recognize them as influential consumer market in the entire business community, right? Not just in the Latino community, because research demonstrates that if we do not focus on building the potential of the Latino community, we're going to be negatively, our economy is going to be negatively impacted for at least the next 3 generations. And of course, anybody who cares about the American economy should care about building and supporting Latino businesses. But then not only do we host, these events and focus on amplifying their stories, we also curate very intentionally events where they can meet these people that are in positions to support and fund and make further connections for the small businesses. Now, shifting gears very quickly to the advocacy and policy piece. That has been something that is very close to our heart because we understand that elected officials really give more attention to communities that have political power, right? And so part of the challenge of a lot of communities of color, including the Black community and the Latino community, is that we have not yet exerted our political muscle. And so we understand that the way to do that is not only by encouraging folks to run for office and to serve on boards, on commissions, and to give a voice to our communities, but also by pushing policy initiatives that really creates a ripple effect. So, for instance, something that we have been very intentional about, particularly, we worked on this before the pandemic, but especially after the pandemic, because so many people are so much more aware of this, is these contracting opportunities, procurement opportunities. I mean, we're talking about local government, we're talking about state government, we're talking about federal government, corporations. And so how do we get our small business owners ready to be at that level? How do we impact policy so that their policies, their procurement policies, are inclusive? Because maybe there are smaller businesses that don't meet the threshold but can be subcontractors. So including that in part of their policies to increase the potential for these businesses to scale. And then also making sure that if there's any policy initiative, like some law that is passed, that we follow it, so we make sure that it's funded, right? Because it's very nice to have the ceremony and to say, oh, we passed this law and we're going to help this group and that group. But if a certain piece of legislation is not funded, then it basically dies right there. So how do we educate the people, and allies and people that believe in the work that we're doing, so that we're following the issues and we are holding our elected officials accountable, so that they understand that they also need to make sure that they follow through on their promise.
That's fascinating, because there is a group out of Kansas City called the Right to Start. And it's through Victor Wang, who was the vice president for entrepreneurship at the Kauffman Foundation. And his policy advocacy work, he's actually been able to move a couple of bills through houses, through legislature in, I think, both Missouri and Kansas, around the procurement piece, saying that, can we set aside a portion of dollars for procurement, also around providing tax incentives, et cetera. Because when you think about creating diversity and economic development, creating these very tangible goals, knowing the challenges that these communities face, right? That they might not have access to a CPA to help file taxes. So can we give them, a way to say, in your first 3 years, if you're not filing taxes, that's okay, as long as you're able to start, right? Things like that, things that are more practical, that are the true barriers. And then advocating in procurement to say, can we, and a lot of states have this, but the challenges that we run into is that the procurement process is so hard that it might as well not have it, right? They'll say 10% goes to minority businesses, but they have to fulfill the same requirements as regular businesses. And in some states, that can take 8 to 10 months to get through this process. And so being very intentional about the design around this. Can you talk a little bit more about, so you've got this policy work, but do you also kind of help communicate these to policymakers so they understand that the policy is good, but then the practical application that sits with the bureaucrats can sometimes make it as if there is no policy at all?
Yes. So, I mean, that is actually part of the work. And so my answer is two-pronged, right? So first, yes. So what we work in coalition, none of us do this by ourselves, right? We partner with other community organizations that get this work. And of course, also the private sector and other public sector leaders. But there's a thing in Spanish that, en la unión está la fuerza. In unity, there's power, right? We're more powerful if we're together and united. And so it's important that we're cross-sectional as we approach these issues, so that they see that it's not just this group here asking, it's multiple groups, right? Now, the second prong to my answer is the actual challenge for nonprofit organizations to raise funds to fund positions in the policy and advocacy space. Because there are a lot of foundations that will fund leadership, that will fund economic opportunity, that will fund, everything that has to do with progress. But that technical piece that really is the core, right, of making sure that we advance this policy, as the policy and advocacy piece, the organizing piece, the ensuring that that we have people who are knowledgeable in public policy and who understand the process and the system, who have connections to elected officials who can guide a coalition to activate and to move the needle. Those positions are a little harder to fund, right? And so it's important that that we that the philanthropic community is aware of this as well, because they're the ones who are establishing their priorities, and they're the ones who are deciding where their dollars go. So if philanthropic leaders have this awareness and understand that there is a huge need for organizations like ours and many others to be supported in this space of policy and advocacy, I think it would make much more of a difference for all of us.
Thank you. Yeah, that's such a fascinating conversation, and I think that can be like a whole series by itself. So Raquel, let me bring you into this conversation. I'm fascinated by, I see on Twitter statistics all the time about lack of representation in venture capital and in capital in general for underrepresented entrepreneurs, and I kind of want to know from Lightship Foundation and your perspective, what Candace and Brian are doing. What barriers are you all breaking, and do you have success stories? I'm sure you have everyday success stories, but of founders that otherwise, if you weren't doing this work, wouldn't have been in this space and wouldn't have been funded or wouldn't have the ability to follow their dreams.
Yeah, for sure. So our headquarters is in Cincinnati, but our second office is in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so if you know the story of Tulsa and the Tulsa massacre, and understanding just as the people in the community, how far behind that community has been. And so we've been able to connect with partners like Atento Capital and Build in Tulsa, who are working to rebuild this community. And so one of our goals as an organization is just to bring as many entrepreneurs as we can to Tulsa so we can help rebuild some of these things. We've had folks who've come to our boot camps, who own grocery stores there, who have been able to really incorporate technology into the processes that they're using. We've had quite a few founders who have just up and moved their entire team to Tulsa. And so Tulsa is doing some amazing work in terms of, if you want to go there, they have a program called Tulsa Remote, and they will fund up to $10,000 just for you to live there. So whether that's a down payment on a house or if that's just for rent. And so we're just trying to make these connections and provide founders with these resources so we can kind of help just put Tulsa, just get them on a level playing field. And so that's just some of the things that we're really passionate about and being in these communities. We just saw one of our boot camp participants, she just bought a house. And so those are the kind of stories that, really excite us. And so we're trying to do that work in Cincinnati and Tulsa. And it's like we said, there's still work to be done, but just being in those communities where we traditionally have been overlooked and leveling that playing field and kind of giving them an unfair advantage. In Tulsa, we give a $500 million investment to all companies that go through the accelerator, which is higher than our Cincinnati accelerator, because we just want to make sure that we're giving the resources to the founders that need them and also providing them opportunities and resources, because we believe like funding is great, but in order for a business and an ecosystem to really succeed, we think that there's three things. There has to be community, there has to be education, and there has to be funding that follows that. So building that and building out that pipeline is what we're super passionate about. And it's been an experience, really. And if you haven't been to Tulsa, it is an interesting place, and I definitely encourage everybody to go if you ever get a chance.
Yes, yeah, we work with a few people there. There's a group called 36 Degrees North that has a space there that's also doing great work. And Oklahoma in general is on fire right now. Just the amount of state and federal dollars that's coming in to help that state is incredible. And I like what you said about there needs to be education and funding. But another thing that you mentioned that I don't usually talk about, and I'm going to start talking about this since you've mentioned it now, is community. I always said, people always say you need capital, but I said, no, you need education and capital, because that makes capital go further and kind of guarantees the success of the capital. But I think a good point that you bring is you need community. And I think the community is the mentoring and people that look like you that can kind of spur you on and say, you've got this, right? And people that, the idea of that, it takes a village, right? I think it actually takes more like a community of people that believe in you to do this work. So I think that's really cool. So Laurie, let's talk about, Grand Rapids, and I'll tell this story. I'm only telling the story to set the stage up, not making any remarks about Grand Rapids itself. But what I remember is, and I had a couple of my team members come with me, was that, the Grand Rapids downtown is beautiful, right? But like, if you go like 5 miles out, you suddenly feel like you're in a second world or a third world country, right? Like the difference is stark. And I know that you're doing really important work to kind of bring the community together through programs like, the Start Garden 100 and others that give a platform for entrepreneurs to get started. Tell us a little bit about that program and other programs that you have and other collaborations you have with the other chambers in the city, with other partners, et cetera, to kind of level the playing field for especially Black and Latino founders that, might not have that same access?
Yeah, so we have a couple of programs. One of the programs is called 5x5 Night, and it literally is a pitch competition that we do monthly. And it's 5 entrepreneurs get selected. They get 5 minutes. They get 5 slides. There's 5 judges, and they get $5,000. And it can be any kind of an idea. It can be a tech idea, to a food idea, to a product, a service, and we do that monthly. And we do take it out into the community. We do it at our space downtown a lot, but we also do make sure that we have it in locations where people might not ordinarily come downtown. So it just makes it more inclusive. And I think since we've been doing that, we get more and more participation from all the different communities around Grand Rapids and even in the, outside of Grand Rapids, West Michigan. And then we have another program called the Start Garden 100, which we started in 2018. And that's a little bit bigger of a program. It takes a little bit longer. We do a request for people to submit videos of their business idea. We narrow it down out of all the videos to 100 people. Each one of them get $1,000, and then they get a couple of months to work on their idea. And then they come to a demo day, which we just had last night. And at that event, all 100 entrepreneurs are there. And at the end of the evening, we award 10 people another $20,000, which I spoke about before. I think what we've been able to build with a lot of these programs is by collaborating with a lot of the other organizations in the community. These 2 platforms are just providing grant money to businesses, and yet, it's exciting, but there needs to be some preparation. So a lot of the organizations have built different types of workshops and programs and things to help prep entrepreneurs to get ready for these programs. So it has created sort of this synergy with all the different organizations. There's a great organization called Spring GR. We have the different chambers. We've got other ESO groups in the community. And together, we kind of try to help prepare people to be part of those programs. And our vision as an organization is that providing small grants, these small seed money grants, just gets people into the top of the funnel. And then from that, we kind of narrow it down. And, out of 100, we come out with 10 that are really, really viable that we can continue to work with and continue, to help them get follow-on funding. And I think that's kind of the name of the game. We just did some statistics for our 10-year anniversary, and we've given out in small grants, we've given out over 10 years, a little over $3 million. But the follow-on investment from those companies that we gave money to is $550 million. So, I mean, it sounds like, 10 years, 3 million, that's great. That's not that much. But when you consider that was maybe a catalyst for the rest of that follow-on funding, I think we feel like that makes a difference. But we are now kind of thinking, okay, we need a phase 3 for our organization. We have the top of the funnel. We have, we're helping these companies grow and scale. And yet we're sort of seeing this plateau where they get to that next level. They're not quite ready for a big investor. But in order to take another big step, they need another infusion of capital. And so we have a plan, which I can't announce, for our phase 3, which is really to get people to the next level. And I'll just give a quick example. We have a program with Meijer, which is a local. If you don't know what Meijer is, it's a local grocery and bigger chain. It's similar to Walmart. They have all you can go in there and buy anything in the world. But Meijer specifically has a program where they want to work with entrepreneurs of color to get more products on their shelves. And we partnered with them to get a lot of our entrepreneurs into that program. We have several that made it into all 253 stores. But for an entrepreneur to be retail ready for 253 stores means they've got to have that product to deliver. And so some of them needed help to make that inventory. I mean, the promise at the end of the day was that, you know, they were going to have this big contract with Meijer. But, you know, some people needed, you know, like $50,000 to get the inventory ready. And it was difficult for us to help them get to that point through local lenders or CDFIs. And it was, you know, they didn't have enough time. So we're kind of thinking there's something we can attack. There's a way that we can help. So.
That's amazing. I love the Meijer story, where, you know, it allowed the entrepreneurs that would not have access otherwise to retail space to be able to actually get their products on there. And that is transformational, right? Because that's a significant barrier to get, you know, one retail spot costs over $20,000 or something crazy like that. To have that, to be the conduit that connects communities and brings opportunity to them. So that's fascinating. And we'll bring you back to make that big announcement to us once you have that idea. So Eneida, I'll bring you into the conversation as well. Can you share a little bit more about, you also do kind of community development and helping with professional development, helping LatinX entrepreneurs, or even just professionals get access to corporations and get access to these different forums. How have you seen that kind of change the narrative in the community?
Yes. So in fact, that is actually our core, right? Because we started focusing on leadership, and we expanded to entrepreneurship and policy and all that, because we, as I said earlier, we realized how important everything is tied in together, right? And so I would say, again, it's our success. Well, first of all, Raquel, you said something really, really powerful a few minutes ago. And, when I talk about this issue, I always say that, we focus on solutions that are intentional, deliberate, and sustainable. And what you said completely aligns, right? Because our intentionality is in building our communities. So, that's kind of like the power of connecting the dots. And that's why our logo is kind of like a dot connector, because we're about making sure that we're connecting with leaders at the local level, state, national, etc. And ensuring that we're finding that commonality of the interest to perhaps grow and the interest to help and support that growth. And ensuring that then they continue the work, right, moving forward. We're deliberate by providing education, and you use the term education, right? It's important that we educate all our stakeholders, right? That we host convenings that discuss the opportunity gaps, but also the solutions, and to also have people at the table who are respected leaders that that others might say, well, if he or she's doing it, then we should also do it, right? And then we visualize that sustainability by ensuring funding, right? Not only funding for the organizations that are doing the good work of bringing together these coalitions and making sure that we're supporting our small business community, and to highlight also our micro business community, right? Because there are a lot of micro businesses that are, based on what I know of this, less than 5 employees, and I believe less than $250,000 in revenue, which is a lot of the businesses in in Black and Brown communities. So ensuring that if you are one of those micro businesses, but you are growth oriented, that you receive the funding, that you receive the resources, that you're connected to all these opportunities, to ensure that that scaling of your business. So so it's just it's a collective effort. It's a collective effort of allies, of people in the community, small business leaders and micro business leaders, and and allies who understand that this is, we need to do this now, right? If we don't act, it's only going to affect our economy in a negative way.
And in terms of your corporate engagement,
Mhm.
how do you message to corporations around this? Because I know that they have their own kind of, supplier diversity programs, but they also have their, their sustainability and corporate responsibility programs, etc. Have you found any ways to bring corporations onto the table, because they have so many resources, and we typically look at government as a solution for D&I and economic opportunity. But corporations have a ton of money between the CRA dollars, also how they can hire. Do you have any effective programs for how to engage with corporations?
Yes, so our Power Up program is certainly one of the most effective, where we partner with corporations, with corporate leaders, right? Because I think fundraising and development is very personal. So people give to people, and and it's important that that we have those, that we build and cultivate those relationships with corporate leaders, and sometimes it can be as simple as, so we do host the convenings and make sure that we're connecting our small business leaders with, with these opportunities. But also it can be as simple as simply pointing out that there are diverse businesses that could provide certain services, right? I know a lot of good actors who are actively looking for procurement, to provide opportunities to to businesses of color. But then also there's there's the intention, but that there's the actual right delivery and execution of the policies that they have in place. And so so it's kind of like digging a little deeper, and understanding how we could potentially collaborate and provide solutions to to these barriers that might be in their policies, so that there's an open door for for the smaller businesses. And I know I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but for example, we had an event recently at a venue, and they had zero catering companies that were companies of color. And so we, in a very authentic and collaborative way, gave them a short list of businesses that we know are are ready to provide that service, and suggested that they could incorporate them into their list, and they welcomed it with open arms, right? Because sometimes it's about making sure that we're making those connections. So it can be as as elaborate and sophisticated as looking at the policies and and serving as a thought partner, etc. But also simply saying, hey guys, we have this directory here, just tap into it, and you'll find your candidates.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So I'll see if there are any questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand, and I can pull you into the conversation. But let's keep the conversation going. We've got about 10 minutes left. I want to just ask your thoughts more generally, the three of you. So Raquel, if you want to tell us, like, when you look at the work that's that you're doing, have you found like any like bright spots or kind of like takeaways that that people that might be looking to either like establish a fund, or I don't know, do you have any like programs for people that want to establish similar funds for people of color, or are looking to do some of the programming that you do with boot camps, etc. If you have any like lessons learned or things that you've seen along the way that you're like, I want to highlight this as steps that if you do if you don't have those missteps, you could start faster.
Yeah, I think in terms of programming, what we have found to be really successful is offering a diverse suite of programs. I think usually every year, at least as far as I've worked here, and it's been since 2018, we have developed a new program. And so I think when it comes to programming and providing resources, you have to evaluate the market and understand what the founders needs. And that changes year over year. Like as we're going into an economic downtrend, we are implementing a new program next year. And so we're going to continue to do that. But I think diversifying your program, and also like you have to bring diverse experiences to the table in order to kind of grow and evolve as an ecosystem. We have to provide more dollars for diverse funders. That's really important when we talk about founders getting, like, we want to fund founders, underrepresented founders and diverse founders, but we have to give diverse founders those dollars to deploy. So I think having those diverse funders and also a diverse suite of of programs. And so we can start diversifying the experience and understand, like, things grow and they change. And so over time, it's just like anything. When you're coming up with a marketing or strategy for your business for that year, we do the same thing for programming. What's working, what's not, and some things we'll keep and some things we'll do away with. So I think keeping that in mind, and don't be, it's not about, the destination, it's about the journey. And so that's going to change over time. But as long as, everybody, we all have the same mission here. Like you said, we're all doing it in different ways. But I think being flexible and being adaptable is super helpful when it comes to programming.
Yeah, I love that point around understanding your audience. And we advocate for that a lot. Like, we think we know what our community needs, but it doesn't hurt to do a quick survey or do, just a little pulse to understand where founders are or where your community is at. And you'll be typically surprised by little nuggets that you did not expect that can go into your programming. And we've done surveys across the country, and we always bring little bright spots or little learnings that our clients were not aware of. And they were like, oh, we didn't know that. For example, we finished a study in Michigan where our client said capital is top of everybody's mind. But when we did the survey, we found that, for businesses that were well established, it was actually finding the right talent and getting their supply chain figured out was way more top of mind than capital. And they said, oh, we need to get this in front of our workforce development group, and we need to get this in front of our other teams because we didn't expect this. We thought it was simply a small business problem and capital is always number one. Well, it's not always number one, right? Depending on, like you said, the different changing needs. And I love that don't be afraid to just survey your community and ask them what their needs are. Laurie, over to you.
Oh, I thought I was on mute. No, I'm not. Yeah, I think, one of the things for us, and again, like you just said, David, everybody kind of thinks capital is always what everybody needs to get started. And sure, that helps. And we do obviously believe in that because we have, a couple of, grant programs, but we do that really to stimulate ideas and to get people, give people some opportunity to get some traction. And then, as they move along, we don't have a lot of technical assistance programs. So our programs are really more about, pitching your idea, getting a little bit of money to get things started. And then we feel like by collaborating with a lot of the other organizations in the community, we network those other, technical assistance opportunities and working together as a community to make sure that we're surveying what do the entrepreneurs need, what are the gaps in our community that we don't have that we, then can fill instead of everybody running to offer the same type of programs. Let's try to find the sweet spots in each of the organizations and then focus on that and do a really good job at that, and not confuse the entrepreneurs and have them bouncing all over the place, that there's more of a pathway that is clear to see, and organizations working together for the good of the entrepreneurs. But I think to also talk about, there's capital, and then we talked again about, access, and it's really, it's access to capital, but it's also access to networks. And I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs of color don't have the access to the networks and the connections that they need. They know what they're doing in their business. They're good business people. They just don't have the access to the connections. And so we feel pretty strongly about not just giving them connections, but also making sure that they're members of that community. They're not just given access to a community that they don't belong to, that they become important members of the community, whether it's, the investment community or whether it's, anything that can help further along a business. So, yeah. I think we're trying to make some inroads, and not to knock mentorship, but we feel like being, be funding some of these companies at the higher levels is more important than providing a mentor. That a mentor isn't really always something that somebody needs. It's really just, you know, it's like just put me in the right place, and I can really do a good job. Yeah.
I love it. And I love that point you made about, you all have your lanes, and being able to create a network where the entrepreneur knows easily where to go can sometimes be a huge way to solve that problem. And Eneida, I'll give you the last word on this. Try, and you can wrap us and bring us home around, what are some lessons that you've learned that, we can take away as other people try to do such work?
Thank you. So Laurie, you said something also that, it's music to my ears, right? Because mentoring is wonderful, but championing is even more powerful, right? And there's a big distinction. I can mentor people all I want, but if I'm not naming names when they're not in the room, if I'm not promoting their business, if I'm not doing things to support their growth, then, it's kind of like it's not holistic, right? It's not, it doesn't come full circle, I think.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, David, so what we've learned is that, again, working in coalition, I mean, we always intended to do that, but making sure that we have very diverse voices at the table, just saying the same thing, and collaborating with them as well with their initiatives, and using data to drive home the message, right? So we we co-sponsor research, we co-sponsor polling and surveys, where we focus not only on the Latino community as a whole, but also on the small business community. And then we, we break it down into, gender, into, ethnicity. And of course, we have, Black, Brown, communities that, come into that equation, so that we see the, the full scope of the data, but then also the breakdown, right? Women-owned businesses, women, minority-owned women businesses, right? Minority-owned business, Black, Latino, etc. And so by breaking it down and creating these scorecards that are so visual that you cannot ignore, right? That people are seeing this and they're saying, oh my gosh, yeah, there's a gap, but then the gap is like triple when it comes to, women, Black women-owned businesses or Latina women-owned businesses. Then I think that kind of like jolts folks a bit and pushes people to want to be more active and in finding those solutions that we're proposing. And and at the end of the day, again, it's not about imposing, it's not about like saying, you need to do this, because that doesn't work with anybody. Human nature is to resist any imposition, right? So that's why it's so important to always approach this in a thought partnership way, where we're all coming together with our issues, with our problems, and we're proposing solutions, but we want to hear from you and see where we can meet halfway to achieve sustainable solutions for everybody, so that we may close opportunity gaps that that really at the end of the day affect all of us, right? Because I think one of the messages that for me is the most important, and one of the biggest takeaways that I would share, is that this is not only about Blacks, this is not only about Latinos, this is not only about the indigenous population or the Asian American population. This is about the Americans. This is about the entirety of the United States, and how our economic growth and prosperity and innovation will be negatively impacted if we do not engage diverse communities into the economic prosperity equation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you to Raquel, Eneida, and Laurie for joining us today and sharing, your lessons from your communities. This is going to be a podcast that we will share, and we will also include you in on that when we publish it. But this has been such an important conversation, and I have already, got some ideas that I'm going to take back, and I'm sure the people that listen to this will also find it very valuable. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. We will see you again next quarter for our next Community of Practice event.